Welcome back to another exciting week here at Psychthoughts. We are glad that you are joining us. I am Derek. I'm joined by my best friend and co-host. His name is Doug. How you doing, Doug?
Doing fine, everybody. As usual.
It was just me asking, so that's interesting.
Well, I wanted to make sure that everybody was a part of the conversation. Doing fine. Everything's good. Sleeping well, drinking less.
We are joined by our unpaid intern because we have no money, and her name's Elaine. How you doing, Elaine?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Doing well. Any words of wisdom today?
I do not.
Well, there you go. Don't forget, if you like our show or if you don't like our show, either way, subscribe to it because it won't bother you that much. Like us. Us. I don't really care. Like the show. Share the show with friends, and that'll be great. We're going through a series where we're going to talk about famous psychological experiments. Last week, we dealt with the Stanford prison experiment, and we didn't receive a single phone call from one Dr. Zimbardo. At least my phone didn't ring. Did yours, Doug?
I would have noticed the number. I don't answer the numbers I don't know. So I did have a call from California. It might have been him.
I did get a call from a restricted number.
But he didn't leave a message, so I didn't talk to him.
There you go.
He's off my list. He's off my Christmas card list. Dr. Zabar, you're not getting nothing from me this year. So there we go.
Not getting anything from Doug.
Not getting anything.
I'll give you something if you'll call and promote the show. Wouldn't bother me. I'm a sellout from way back.
Some beard oil.
And then we're also some beard. Yeah, I lost my beard oil shirt. I know that some of you are a little freaked out right now that I'm wearing a different shirt. I do support Warlord Beard Oil, but I don't know where my shirt is.
Because you wore it all the time.
Well, like the beard oil, the shirt is silky smooth, and it's just amazing.
Why we're not spokespersons, I don't know.
I don't know either, but we're not. It could be something to do with our viewer list and number. That while we're not spokespersons, today's study is Milgram's conformity experiment. Conformity, right? That's what they called it. Obedience, not conformity.
Conformity was Ash.
Yeah. So Milgram's experiment. Doug, you want to give the rundown? You want me to give the rundown? Who's running it down?
I can give the rundown.
Let's hear it.
So, do you want the theatrical rundown or just the straight by the textbook rundown?
Theatrical.
I think I want the theatrical.
Okay. Picture, you will, the campus of Yale University in the 60s. Dun, dun, dun. You're walking down the street and a man says, "Hey, how would you like to make $5? And you go, "Well, I'm not doing anything. That sounds great." And he takes you into this small room where there's another guy sitting in a chair, and he tells you, "I'm going to be doing an experiment on learning and punishment. We're going to have a little drawing. One of you will be a teacher, and one of you will be the learner. The learner will be taken to a room, strapped to a chair with electrodes. The teacher will ask a series of questions. When you get them wrong, there's this huge device, a diabolical-looking device, that has charges from 25 volts all the way up to 450 volts. Triplets. So you go in there, you sit down, you put the guy in the chair, you start the experiment, it's going fine. He misses one, give him a little shock. Misses two, give him another shock. Then you get up to a certain voltage, and the guy starts making noise. Stuff like, "Ouch!" And then eventually he's like, "Hey, I don't want to do this." And then eventually he's like, "My heart hurts. Please let me out. Oh my God, help!" Now, the experimenter, Stanley Milgram, who we put you in this situation, he came to the conclusion that with obedience to authority, you would pretty much electrocute somebody to death in certain situations based on the person's perception of power base, whether you felt that they were the expert, they were in charge. The experimenter would just only say simply to you, you could quit, or they would go, "I need you to continue for the experiment." When he first presented this idea to his colleagues, they all went, oh, that's a fine experiment, but using people off the street, you're looking for a sociopath, you'll never find any results. People won't go past 50 volts. In the end, he discovered mainly 3 or 4 different unique things about obedience, which we'll discuss about, but he found out on the dark side of human behavior, 65% went all the way. Means they went all the way to where the person didn't make any noise, and basically they went, I think the guy's dead. Now, the little side caveat to the experiment, the guy that was the learner was a Confederate. He was a ringer. He was in on it. No one got shocked. The other bad thing is Milgram didn't debrief anybody. You pretty much got your $5, went home and went, honey, what'd you do today? Well, I went to work. I shot a man to death and made $5. So it's highly unethical. And that's just the gist of the experiment. Dun, dun,
This
dun.
study reminds me a lot of my high school here in Nashville, Tennessee, where also 65% of participants went all the way. That was just an easy joke.
That was, and I laughed. I thought that was a good joke there. My high school, just get off the subject, my high school, somebody wrote in the bathroom that 95% of women love sex. The other 5% attend this school. So that was kind of
Oh, wow.
so.
Was your
Well,
phone
that'll get
number
some hate
above or
mail.
below that, Doug?
I had cards in there. I just gave out cards.
You just gave out cards.
So they wanted, Milgram wanted to do this study because the world was fascinated with why people did bad things. Something we talked about last week. We're going to see kind of the zeitgeist of the time, understanding the atrocities of World War II. Why was it that these soldiers, these Nazi soldiers, were so complicit in this mass execution of the Jewish people, of genocide? Why were they willing to push the button to turn the gas chambers on? Why were they, and then willing to kill people, murder, why were they willing to do this? And what it comes down to is we pretty much follow orders. We like to think we don't, right? If you're anything like me, at one point in your adolescence, you said the phrase, just because my friends are doing it, Mom, doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Milgram's study and many more just like it say, you probably are. Even if you don't think you would do that, you very well might. So 65% of people went all the way up to 450 volts, but maybe equally or just a little more shocking, get it? All participants went up to at least 300 volts of electricity. So started out at 15 and pegged out at 450. Everybody went to at least 300. That's an amazing power of obedience. And what the experimenter who, Doug, now that was Milgram in the room with them, right?
Milgram was in the room with them on some of them, and some of them he was not. The thing is that you'd have to have like an hour to really discuss the essence of this experiment, because he set it up in every possible scenario you could imagine. Okay, he ran it at the University of Yale. Okay, so you thought, well, I'm at the university, I can trust these people. You had there's bases of power, of influence of people. One of them is, well, this is university, I trust this. And then he did the experiment, in some back alley, and he didn't find the same results, because you kind of like, oh, I don't know about this. So he entered into this really in a very logical manner, because he used the location. He also did, what if the guy or the learner was right there, you could see them? Would that change your opinion? What if the experimenter called you on the phone and said, okay, go ahead and start the experiment? He looked at all the different situations that, really worked and different things. He did some of them, and then some of them he had another guy, but all of them, in fact, he varied the experimenter. One of them, he was dressed with a lab coat. Ooh, you know, looked professional. He knows what he's talking about. And then one time he just looked like the average, you know, Joe. Like, yeah, go ahead. I'm okay with it. You know, which he didn't get the same results. So when we say 65%, that was on the original one where, you know, you could hear the person and they were in the next room. But, you know, like on there, he ran at different options where he got different results. And all the results were, you know, very telling about us and how we follow rules in society.
So you could use this time right now to bookmark our page and subscribe to our channel, and then go on a YouTube binge looking up the Milgram experiment, and you'll find all sorts of clips about this study. You'll see some actual recordings of the study in progress. You'll see Mr. Wallace, who was the Confederate, and I don't want to trigger anyone out there. That just means someone who's in on the study. You can hear the dialogue that Mr. Wallace engaged in, even to the point of when he's kind of feigning unconsciousness or maybe presumed death. And I think it's interesting when you watch these videos, the number of people. There's this one guy that stands out in one of these kind of documentaries to me, and he keeps looking at the experimenter and saying, "No, I'm not going to go anymore." And all the experimenter had to say in the lab coat was, "It's really important that you continue." And he was like, "All right." But he was so bothered by it, but he was so shocking, the guy.
What was really funny about it is that all of the people did the same behaviors. When they got up to the higher voltage, if you watch the videos and watch all the clips, they hit it and they hear the guy holler, and then they turn and look at the experimenter. And they'd say, like, "Well, I don't want to be responsible.
What do I do now?"
And the guy would just say, "I just need you to continue." They knew they could quit. He'd go, "I need you to continue for the experiment." And they'd be like, "Okay." And then turn around and continue to do it, you know. The funny thing is,
and they would get this, you know, they would have their hands on their head. They would be ringing. I'm like, they were distraught, but they were still going.
well, you know, one of the funny things is in group dynamics, we talk about influence in groups, and one of the chapters we talk about is power. And we talk about Milgram's experiment. And one of the researchers says that Milgram's experiment worked well because he used nearly all the power bases. You know, he had the power of the expert, of reverence. Hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's a professor. I trust him. You know, I'm at Yale University. I trust him. You know, all of these things went into where we obey. And unfortunately, and nobody probably wants to hear this out of the 4 viewers that watch it, but we come from a society of hierarchy, and we're basically have a disposition to obey. I mean, your boss tells you to do something, or boss tells your assistant boss, the assistant tells the line manager tells you, you do it. I mean, we just fall into that, well, I'll obey. You know, that's the orders. That's the way it is. And one of the cool things about the experiment is Milgram was a fantastic social psychologist. He did an experiment before this where he talked about how norms influence people. And he had his subjects to ride on the New York subway. And when you get on the subway, the norm is you get a seat, you stand, or you sit down. But he had his students get on the thing and just look around, and then they just go up to somebody and go, "Can I have your seat?" And that's not what you do. And, you know, most people would kind of like, okay. But the point of the experiment is that the people that asked, could they have a seat, it bothered them, you know, that they were going against the norm. You know, it'd be like if you got on an elevator, it would bother you if you stood and looked at everybody. You know, you didn't turn and look at the numbers. That's not the norm. And so he used a lot of stuff to culminate into this experiment in the end. So.
And I'm going to give credit to Elaine for like a lot of things. One of them is that she puts up with us. But Elaine brought us this article from March of 2017.
Yeah.
And it says, conducting the Milgram experiment in Poland, psychologists show people still obey. So they replicated this study in Poland. They actually did the study in 2015, and 90% of the subjects went up to the highest level of shock in that study. So this isn't something that we've maybe you could call it cultural evolution. This isn't something we culturally or socially evolved from. This is still a part of who we are. Doug, how far?
Okay, well, let me point the dog. It's a horrendous experiment, but they put a dog in like a shuttle box, which is an electrified box, and you could shock the dog, and you could actually hear the dog scream with pain. And the people that did the experiment had the same reactions as Milgram's experiment. They would look at the dog, they could smell it, they turn, they look at the experiment, they're like, I don't know about this. And they just say, well, I just need you to continue. And they came up with the same percentage that went all the way. Out of the 20 that did the experiment, 65% of them shocked the animal to death, a real live animal. So it kind of brings into question that you might think, well, this is just for play, but I think when we pull the concept of obedience out of Milgram's experiment and apply it into real life, we start to see how that's used. I make fun of the Estee Lauder and Clinique girl. They wear a lab coat, okay? And most of the time they'll go, well, they wear a lab coat because they don't want to get stuff on their outfits. But the fact is, someone got a lab coat on, you're going to kind of go, well, I believe what you're saying. This must be true because you have this technical expert look, and so a doctor don't have to wear that coat, but he does with his name on it, I've always wanted to do an experiment with two classes. One, I'd lecture normally. One, I lecture with my robe on to see how that would set the mood of the class. Would they?
To be fair, just as a point of clarification, you're talking about your academic regalia, not like a bathrobe.
Well, there's a couple of versions of this experiment. Coming with my bathrobe.
Maybe 3 levels at that point. Normal clothes, regalia, open in the front, bathrobe. I think those
hey,
3
kids,
things.
how y'all doing today?
Yeah.
A little shocking.
Yeah, that's probably not a good idea.
I'm
not going to sign off on that.
The whole experiment is fantastic, and it really brings the interest of how well somebody tells you to do something, you do it. Funny thing is that I was watching a documentary the other day, and they were talking about the commander who was over Andersonville, Confederate colonel that was in charge of the Confederates prison. Okay, and it was notorious. Thousands of people died there, and he was charged with war crimes, and they hung him. But the thing that struck me is the day they hung him, he made a comment to the executioner. He said, "Hey," he said, "it's okay, buddy. I understand. You're just like me. I was just following orders." And so we see ourselves. I always think psychology is this neon sign to say, "Pay attention. You're about to mess up." And we get into situations where we stop asking questions and we just blindly follow things. In my group dynamics class, when we talk about power, one of the biggest things we talk about is Jim Jones and, the People's Temple. If you don't know about that, you should Google that, because that's where, we get the expression, drink the Kool-Aid. And he had, he had 900 worshipers, not all 900, but nearly 900 people willingly committed suicide because he asked them to, and so we obey pretty good, we don't like,
and not all of them killed themselves, and in fact some of them were killed at Jonestown, but it's almost shocking to us when we see that this could happen, yet it's happened time and time and time and time again. We all, to use Doug's favorite expression, we all drink the Kool-Aid to some degree. There's implications here with organizational hazing. Why is it that you would ever go along with hazing? And it's this level of obedience. It's just something that that you're willing to do. I have the same feeling about a prostate exam. Why on earth would you ever do that? And it's because the doctor said, we're going to do this. And you're like, all right, I guess I'm going to say yes, ma'am. And we're going to go for it. The idea of obedience then has really scary implications. I think of the Epstein saga and what happened to all those young girls. And at some point, you're not complicit when someone of authority or perceived authority is telling you to do something. You will then, more often than not, just do it, not to infringe on Nike's rights, but you'll do that because that's what you're conditioned to do. I'm a pretty consistent rule follower, right? So if someone, it never crosses my mind if an officer pulls me over and they say get out of the car and I've done nothing wrong. It never occurs to me not to get out of the car. I'm like, absolutely. And it never, I mean, it never even crossed. I'm that much of a placater. My wife could walk in right now and she could be like, you're quitting your job. And I'd be like, that sounds great. Like there's this like level of authority that I answer to. But I'm glad at least to know I'm not alone. Elaine, I cut you off earlier, and
No,
I
that's
feel
fine.
bad for that.
No, I was just going to talk about this replication that they did in Poland. It's really kind of interesting because the replication has to do with the Polish people, and since the original was about the Nazis and their and how they inflicted these tortures on the people in the internment camps, that the Polish people were also in these camps and being tortured. And yet they turn around and take 40 male and 40 female Polish people and do this experiment with them, and 90% of them would do it to somebody else. You know, it's kind of interesting that even though they were the victims during World War II in certain areas, then, you know, but they would do it too if they were told to.
Now,
I think that's a good point. We like to vilify people, don't we? And I'm gonna walk on an eggshell as lightly as I can here. We like to look at that Nazi soldier and say he is a bad person. And certainly, you're not ever going to hear me support anything that Nazi Germany stood for, any of the ideologies, any of the implications. But to assume that that soldier was a bad person is risky when you consider how many people would have been bad had they simply been born in another place. Not good. And I hope I'm light enough on this eggshell because I want to be as clear as I can. I don't support any of that. Just the idea of separating the person from the context.
You got to also bring into life what we talked about with the Stanford prison experiment. You know, Zabar basically proved it doesn't matter whether you're good or bad. It depends on the situation. You know, he had kids that were just, you know, peace-loving people, but when they got put in the position of the guards, you know, they became evil. He called it the Lucifer effect. You know, what is it? Lord Aston once said, you know, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. You know, we like to think that we would. And I'd like to while we have just a few minutes, what I want to point out, one of the most disturbing things, and one of the things that I think in this day and time should bring us hope from Milgram's experiment, is that he did the experiment where he brought in 2 more people to work with the teacher. All right. And he found out that when the 2 people that came in to work with him encouraged the person to continue, that 92% went all the way. But if one person early on said, I don't think this is right, I think we should stop, only 14% went all the way. And so it kind of makes me want to say, what it tells us is that, yes, we are programmed to obey, which is fine. I mean, we have rules, we have norms. It gives us comfort because it makes everything, we know where it's going. But if you're ever in a situation you think, I don't think this is right, you should speak up, because chances are there's someone else there that thinks the same thing. And once they feel like, well, that person thinks that too, I think that we feel there's more power in numbers. You know, and if I say something and then, you know, like my colleague Derek goes, you know, I agree with that, I feel better about what I said. And so if you're in a situation where you think that this is not right, then speak up, because you could make the difference, because someone else in that group might be going, oh, I think that's true too, you know. So I think there's a lot of things we can learn from that experiment. I think it has a lot of value for this day and time. So
I like that you brought that up, Doug, because you've got this intersection here of groupthink versus bystander apathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Groupthink says speak up, right? That way we can have this diversity of opinion. Bystander apathy says the more people who are there, the less likely we are to intervene. Yet, the more people who are there, when you speak up, the more likely you are to intervene. It only takes one person. If you can overcome bystander apathy, it takes one person to act before the group acts, right? Which is really, really powerful. So our challenge, at least what I'm hearing you say, Doug, and I certainly agree with this, and Elaine's going to agree with whatever we say because she's the intern.
No,
Our challenge to you would be the person who speaks up regardless of the consequences, right? And I think that's it's going to be hard, right? It's going to be harder. The bigger the crowd, the more the people, the harder it's going to be. But be bold, right? I almost said confident and fearless with that, wings up. But at any rate, be bold in that moment. And I mean, there's no telling what you might stop. And it takes one person, right? Well,
my granny always told me, if you're doing something and you have to question yourself in your head, should I be doing this? You probably shouldn't.
Yeah, and I think there's a litmus test for that. If you're doing something in this day and age, and suddenly you look around and everyone's recording it, you shouldn't be there. Something bad's happening on this end of the screen, right? Get away from that. Speak up.
Definitely stop recording. That's what kills me. I mean, we embrace that bystander apathy now. It's like, that person's being beaten. I'm going to record it. Go help the person. That is the most insane thing. It's like we have this shocking footage, and I go, well, what's really shocking is someone was right there. They could have done something, but I chose just to be.
There was a man who used to travel around doing leadership workshops. His name was Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser. I don't even know if he's still around, but he used to travel around and do, he would talk to high school leadership. So I was a band kid, and they would send like the section leaders and people to this leadership training. And one thing, he had all sorts of things that I still use today, even in my clinical practice. But one thing that he always said was, everyone laughs when they find the turd in the toilet. A leader laughs, but then flushes the toilet. And I love it because you're still human, but now act, right? Your inclination will be pull your phone out and record it also. Act.
Just be
act
different.
Instead.
Act
Be different. Yeah. My thing says be weird, right? And you want to know more about that, you can ask me about that too. That's all I have. What do you have, Elaine?
that's it. Just the flush,
Doug?
I guess.
Well, I think we pretty much summed up everything you ever wanted to know. I was afraid to ask about that study.
We hope you enjoy this. If you don't, you should know that we do. So they're going to keep happening. You might as well subscribe, like the channel, share the chat. I don't know if you can share that. Find us on the social medias. We're on all of them. I'm on none of them, but Elaine can tell me if you need something, and that'll be great. Also, you can always reach out to us by sending us an email, psychthoughts@tntech.edu. That's psychthoughts@tentech.edu. For those of you coming back to campus in just a week, we look forward to seeing you there, and that'll be great. Stay safe, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.